All right, Dirk, take it away.
Well, we are on day 67 of the legislature today. And Saturday is actually the transmittal deadline for a lot of different bills. And so things are coming fast and furious in terms of hearings and also in terms of turnarounds for floor votes. We're once again in the middle of a real busy time. Right now, the transmittal deadline is for revenue bills, but they're putting a bunch of other legislation in to the mix right now. So the legislature is going to be meeting this evening. The Senate's going to be meeting probably tomorrow evening, in addition to just during the day. And then Saturday, they're going to be having a floor session as well. So they're moving through stuff at a pretty rapid pace. And so now's the time to sort of pay attention. And I'll be talking about some of those bills in the coming slides. Well, yeah. And so before we get started, we've had some resounding success in killing some of these bad judiciary bills. So much so that they have basically retooled and introduced two bills that will allow the option of Supreme Court justices to be labeled as a party candidate, as a party affiliation. So they've trimmed it down quite a bit and they have made it optional. They are still very bad ideas. It's a bad idea to inject this type of partisanship into our judiciary. They are, I think, exactly the same, these SB 543 and 838 in terms of language. And they are both needing to pass third reading by Saturday, which means they are up for a floor vote tomorrow or as early as tonight. So those two bills and HB 285 are all going to be voted on in very short form. So I would really encourage you to engage. So here's what we've heard on HB 285. It is up tonight for a vote. The Senate just broke and they're in committees right now. And let's see here, it's 4:30. I'm guessing it's probably around 6 that they're going to come back on the floor, and it's like number 9, 10, or 11 on the agenda. So that's happening. And we've also heard that the vote may be really close. So this is one that when your participation may actually really matter. So I'd jump in, I'd call your senator, I'd call the folks that we have listed on the bottom of the slide here, who may be persuadable. We've heard that this is going to be a really close vote. So engage. I would highly recommend it.
And just as a reminder, we do record these calls and put them up on our website and on our YouTube channel by usually noon on Fridays. So if you're feeling very called to take urgent action on these bills, you can catch up on the rest of our call tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. So just let us know if you need any resources to contact anyone here. You can put it in the chat and me or Ben will help you take action on that. We'll keep going with the rest of our slides as normal, but just wanted to give you the option.
Awesome. And we've been actually doing really well there's still a lot of bad stuff, but we've stopped a lot of stuff. Most importantly, the worst partisan judiciary bill failed earlier this week, or late last week, I can't remember, on second reading in the House. And so we're in a good position, only having those two Supreme Court bills. Also, SB 358 was the bill that it was a compromise bill. It had some good things associated with it, but on Friday, the amendments that were tacked on just became too much for us to be able to support it. So we moved into opposition mode, and that bill died a resounding death yesterday on the Senate floor, 35-14, with half of the Democrats and a large chunk of the Republicans voting against it. And so that's good. There was just too many exemptions in that bill, and we're gonna probably have to go back to litigation and to another working group on that issue. SB 301, this is a good bill that basically allows for the utilities to seek pre-approval for transmission projects, but not without conditions, such as environmental condition, siting and consideration conditions, and a few other things. So this is a good bill. This is the way that we want to see pre-approval work. And this bill has moved on to the House. HB 326 and HB 915 related to taxing wind in an unfair way have both failed. And unless they are brought up somehow very miraculously in the next 24 hours, are very likely dead because of this transmittal deadline that we're facing. And then a fun little sort of thing that I've been engaged in the past few weeks is the Bull Mountain mine has an absurd tax credit that they can claim for washing their coal. And it was scheduled to sunset in 2025. And the company was pushing to just get rid of the sunset and have it be a permanent tax credit. And we were able to not just kill the bill that completely repealed the sunset on the tax credit, but also introduced a contingency bill to just extend it for 2 more years. And we also killed that. So again, unless something really sneaky happens in the next 24 hours or so, Signal Peak's they're going to have to start paying. The state's no longer going to be subsidizing that activity, and they're going to be paying their way a little bit. So that's a wonderful bill that we were able to kill. A bad bill, wonderful victory. Okay. And I'm just going to keep going because I'm just on the hot seat tonight. Like Katie said, we have a lot of people out. SB 221. This is the bad MEPA bill. That is the fence line bill. It has passed out of committee, but because it's already transmitted and it's not a revenue bill, there is not any deadline associated with it. It may or may not be heard in the next few days, but it'll probably be heard next week, is my guess. It's just sitting outside of the vote in committee and waiting to be scheduled for the floor vote. HB 291 and 285 are up in the Senate today starting at probably 6 o'clock, if I had to guess, as I mentioned. And 291 is, I think, can be really tough to try and stop, but 285, it may be close. So I would really encourage you all to reach out to your senators, as I already mentioned, and Katie can drop that list in the chat if she hasn't already. An update on 270. This is the MEPA bill that we suggested was good to support. And I still think it's okay if it passes, but it's become sort of a bad bill. And here's why. There's something called basically a coordination clause. And there's been significant amendments to HB 270 that have added 3 coordination clauses to incorporate language from HB 285 and SB 221. And so if those bills pass, they get incorporated into HB 270. So in a sense, it is a bad bill now. And so we're messaging to legislators to oppose it. But if it was just HB 270 that passed, it would be okay. So it's kind of hard to message. So we're just saying vote no on all these MEPA bills at this point. That would be our recommendation. And HB 270 is also going to be on the floor in the Senate today. All right. And then we got the coal mine water quality material damage bill. We're going to have what I hope to be a really good hearing tomorrow in Senate Natural Resources that should be starting at 3:00 p.m. And this is the bill that tinkers with water quality and quantity impacts for coal mines outside of their permit boundary and basically reduces protections. And this is the worst water bill of the session. well, that's saying a lot, but the worst coal mining and water quality bill of the session, because there's a lot, by far. And so we're working to stop this bill. This one may be something that we need to work on post-session. I'm skeptical we're going to be able to stop it, but we're going to do our best. And it's, again, has a hearing tomorrow afternoon. Numeric nutrient standards, the repeal of them, as we've done in the past and EPA's rejected, has had a hearing and is currently sitting in front of Senate Natural Resources. There's no transmittal deadline associated with it because it's already been transmitted. And we're asking for people to vote no on that, as well as HB 685, which is a bill that would change Montana's non-degradation policy to what they want to call a feasibility allowance. So instead of trying to prevent the degradation of rivers and streams, we're instead thinking about how much pollution is feasible. It's sort of turning that process on its head. And it also has some really problematic language related to the balancing test that the DEQ would normally go through when it considers permitting a degradation permit or allowing for degradation. So both those bills are in Senate Natural Resources. There was a slew of water bills heard earlier this week on Monday, and they're all sitting there and probably waiting to be voted on because of the transmittal deadline. And so Senate Natural Resources is the place to go for that action. All right, and I've touched on both of these already. These have a deadline of Sunday or Saturday. I have to pass third reading, which means tomorrow they have to go through second reading. Could be heard as early as tonight. And we have a list of folks that need to be contacted on these. They both have passed out a committee, and so they are ready for floor votes in the next 48 hours. So these are really important action items that we need to have folks reach out on. And I'm going to hand it over to Ben now, who's been doing some incredible work on styrofoam. I mean, I never thought we'd get this far in this legislature, but this is just amazing stuff.
Pretty exciting stuff. And Matt Elsicer is also on the call, and he's been working hard on it as well. So thanks to Matt too. And really credit belongs with Marilyn Marler, the representative that's carrying this bill. It's just been really smart in how she's guiding it through the process. But it's a bill I'm sure you guys have probably, and UPA, yes, thank you very much, Katie, for reminding me. UPA's been working so hard on all the plastics and sending out action alerts, connecting the whole state. So huge credit there as well. Lots of folks involved is the bottom line. But we have a hearing on Monday, Senate Natural Resources, 3:00. And really excited. The last hearing was a really cool exhibition of lots of different innovations in food containers and composting and recycling, and getting a lot of those folks together to talk about how by phasing out hazardous material like polystyrene, styrofoam, we can actually generate some circular economy action in Montana and see a lot of benefit. So that's what we'll be talking about, and keep your fingers crossed.
Okay, and then we have some positive land use bills that we're supporting. And this is what we're characterizing as some gentle density bills, trying to make developments a little bit more dense, primarily for climate related considerations. And so the first one is to allow for triplex and fourplex housing in what is normally single family neighborhoods at this point. This is something that a lot of communities such as Bozeman have already done at this point. And it's basically allowing for a little bit more density, but not high rises in neighborhoods. And we think this is a good, gentle step forward. And then HB 492 is a parking related bill that we initially sort of opposed because it was a little too draconian against cities and their ability to make local decisions, but it provided some more flexibility in terms of those decisions and remove some of the commercial related considerations. So allowing for a little more flexibility so we don't have parking lots that are sitting empty, which is something that we really want to discourage. And then HB 764 is a positive study bill that's evaluating public transit opportunities, supported by folks like Mountain Line in Missoula and the transit system in Bozeman. And this is a study bill for evaluating how we can potentially increase public transit opportunities across the state of Montana and some of our communities. So some good bills out there on land use. And some bad ones, of course. The HB 714 is a bill that would decrease the ability for local governments to deny family transfer. This is a bill that what it does is it basically requires that local governments have to prove intent to evade the family transfer law, which is a really difficult, frankly, standard in the law in proving intent. And so what you will see is a larger amount of family transfer exemptions being approved by cities and counties because that's a difficult legal standard for them to pursue, and they will not want to take on a potential, get sued, frankly. And so family transfers being the primary way that unfortunately folks avoid and abuse our subdivision law, and this is going to make it worse, big time. Additionally, SB 436, exempt wells are a real problem. This bill is a bit unique in that it's not terrible. It sort of puts back into law the definition of a combined appropriation. The problem with this bill is that at this point, this bill is probably going to be a vehicle for mischief now that the other bad exempt well bill has failed. And so this is one to watch and to be ready to basically work to try and kill as we move further down the session, because it's sponsored by a developer / legislator, and certainly a lot of the development community don't want to see any impact to exempt wells. And so this is going to be a problem bill for us in the second half of the session. So keep your eyes on that one. And nukes. So this is not, full disclosure, not my area of expertise, but I chatted with Ann a little bit beforehand. Both of these are now moving on to the Senate floor. We are trying to get an amendment on HB 623 that would require tribal consultation before the establishment of a nuclear waste facility if it is within a certain distance of a reservation, as it was amended in the House to say that, but that was stripped out in the Senate Energy Committee. And so we're trying to get that amendment back on it. And that's going to be a floor amendment that we're attempting. And for HB 696, we're just pushing folks to try and kill that bill. We don't think that there's any chance of getting an amendment. So we're just asking folks to vote no. And on these two bills, I would encourage folks, even if you live in the liberal heart of Missoula, to reach out to your senator and your representative, because there's a lot of Democrats that are curious about nuclear and are interested in trying to develop it. And so they need to hear from you, because this is not a partisan issue, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have tons of nuclear resources on our website. If you have any questions or thoughts or want to chat more about why we have such a hard stance against nuclear, we can talk to you about that. We would love to have that conversation. The more we've learned about it, the more it just seems like a false promise, trusting in something that doesn't exist yet, as opposed to investing in resources and energy generation that does. So reach out and let's have a conversation about it.
And all right, keep on going. HB 490. So this is a sweetheart deal for Northwestern Energy, where they're basically trying to carve out and reduce or eliminate their potential liability if and when they are to cause a wildfire or a fire associated with their transmission lines. It has been somewhat fixed, is my understanding, in terms of the amendments that went on in the House. They are not enough to satisfy us, and the bill is still a bad bill in terms of the ability for people to basically prove liability. That's what they're trying to avoid. And then there's still some problematic language, so we're still pushing people to basically oppose the bill. And that, so you have circumstances like what happened in California as well as here in Montana with the Denton fire that really impacted that community. And so we want the utility to be accountable for their operations. And this is a bad bill. It's trying to exempt them from an HB 911 and HB 877 sort of go hand in hand. What they are trying to do is allow for Northwestern to basically create a separate entity that is not regulated, that can serve data centers or large customers or data centers. HB 911 really is any large customer, and 877 is really geared towards data centers, without having to go through the normal approval process that you would expect at the Public Service Commission, but for ratepayers to still be potentially on the hook for costs associated with those projects. And so this is problematic just from a basic utility regulatory point of view. In addition to data centers are really big energy pigs and problematic from that point of view, and could potentially cause for some of these legacy polluters such as coal strips to stay online quite a bit longer in order to fill the energy needs of those consumers. And so that's the other thing that we're concerned with. Whew. All right. We do have a good energy siting bill that is reasonable, that has been moving through the process, HB 939, and it has come out of the House Energy Committee. And I think the vote was actually like 13-1 or something like that. A lot of support. This is something that we can support that is reasonable in terms of the siting, where and how wind can be sited, and has some protections for landowners while still allowing for development to occur so that we can get more wind and solar online. SB 188, this is the bill that we've asked for our folks to stand down on. We have a really strong in capital game, and it still is moving through the process. We're in a good spot. This is the solar bill that would allow for community solar in Montana that Senator Pope is carrying. And so far, so good. I don't know if McKenna's on the call and she can add more, but it's in a great spot. And HB 760 is the solar consumer protection law. Basically, there's some companies out there that are a little bit shady, going door to door, ripping people off with solar contracts, and this sort of clamps down on it. It's a national problem, and this is Montana's response to some of those shadier companies. And then we have a couple of general energy opposition bills. The first one is HB 122 for utilities to site pipelines for gas. Right now, they have to go through some additional permitting in order to assure that, well, they're safe and they're not going to leak gas, and a few other considerations. And this would basically just by default allow for them to site and build gas pipelines without having to go through any local permitting process. That's something that we're opposed to. That unfortunately is now going to the Senate floor, and HJ 17 is just a resolution, but it's a terrible resolution, basically sending a letter to the president and our congressional delegation asking that our major environmental laws be amended or repealed. And we're obviously very much opposed to that. Not much more we need to say about it, but that is now heading to the Senate floor as well. And we have some stellar, some good Was there a question?
No, that's Ann.
Oh,
And here, if
you
you'd
want to
like,
jump in?
I'd be happy to. Thank you for doing everything so far. I just finished on 2 of these resolutions, so let's chat transmission.
Oh, heck yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
SB 301 is a bill that has that MEIC has supported. It allows pre-approval by the Public Service Commission for a transmission project, but it is pre-approval with lots of sideboards. It is not just a pre-approval like the legislature gave to Northwestern for generation facilities, which was no holds bar. This one actually requires them to do the environmental review first. It requires them to do, make sure that everything is in the public interest. And it allows them to say if they spend more money than they are approved for, the commission doesn't have to grant them that money. So it's not just this blank check for spending by the utility. It's very much, it incorporates the idea that the commission can claw back anything that was imprudently incurred by the utility. So we support this. We need to get some transmission going in the state. And we think that this might be a step in the right direction, as long as the sideboards that we put in stay in. And at this point in the session, you never know if that's the case. SB 355, this is another bill. It just increases competition with our regulated utilities. Right now, regulated utilities kind of have a stranglehold on the transmission system. And it's one of the things that is impeding development of new transmission lines. Montana Dakota Utilities in Eastern Montana has the ability to kind of jump in. If somebody wants to build a transmission line, they have the ability to jump in and do it instead, and then stall it out. So this bill prevents that. It just allows competition between the private sector and the kind of merchant operators and these regulated utilities to put them on level playing field for building transmission, because you have a lot of private developers out there who have built transmission projects around the country. And if they can do a good job, we should let them. Next bill, HJ 15. It's just a resolution. This is our resolution. Representative Kometz is carrying it. It just had a great hearing in Senate Energy, and all it is trying to let our congressional delegation know the governor sending a strong message that Montana wants more transmission, that we support it. It has passed nearly unanimously through the House. It is going to, without a doubt, pass through the Senate Energy Committee and probably again also get bipartisan support in the Senate side. It's a cross section of interests that want more transmission. We know that some gas companies want more transmission so they can build more gas, but we also think that competition is going to lead to people wanting to have lower cost energy resources, and that's wind and solar. So transmission lines are agnostic as far as what energy resources go on them, but without them, we cannot build more renewable energy resources, which is what most people are interested in doing today. Next is SJ 12, interim study on transmission. This is a study on kind of intrastate transmission, trying to figure out where we have shortfalls in the state of Montana when it comes to transmission capacity. And the next bill is very much a complement to it, which is an interim study that would look at how we can better connect to the region. So how can we better connect to the Pacific Northwest, to the South, to the North? How can we have a transmission system that is larger than our weather system, which is really what we need. We need to be able to move energy over bigger distances in order to make sure that we're getting the lowest cost energy, and that when the sun is shining in one place and not in another, that we can move that power around to meet the needs. So these two last resolutions are very complementary and will give us some work in the interim, but hopefully could help us continue to educate legislators on the importance of intra and interstate transmission development.
All right, before we get to our event, Ben had another bill he wanted to talk about briefly.
I get so focused sometimes looking at all the bills that are on our slides and making sure that the dates are right, that I forget about ones that I'm kind of responsible for. So there's another resolution coming up. It's House Joint Resolution 37. It's carried by Representative Staffman out of Bozeman, and it's to request an interim study of perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, the PFAS, the forever chemicals that we know are unfortunately so pervasive in our environment at this point. And so it's kind of following on the heels of a bill that we tried to pass earlier in the session that would have actually taken some action to limit the sources of those PFAS from certain products into Montana. And unfortunately, that didn't get very far. So this would take a hard look at those sources, how they're getting into our environment, how they're getting into our bodies, and try and come up with some ideas for how we can enable action around that. So it's going to be in House Business and Labor. Almost certainly it'll be scheduled for a hearing next week. And House Business and Labor meets in the mornings, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. So I know a handful of you on the call are in an email chain with me, and I'll keep you posted if I see anything move on that. So thanks.
Thanks, Ben. That info is in the chat if you need the number and you're a visual word person like me, HJ37. We have a question on study bills SJ12 and SJ21. Do studies include public input in the process?
Yes, they do. What generally happens when you have these study resolutions is after the session, legislators vote on which study resolutions they want to move forward with, and then those study resolutions are assigned to a committee. It is extremely likely that both of these study resolutions are going to receive enough support. They'll be assigned to the to the Energy Interim Committee. And then that committee will meet every 2 months or so, and every one of those meetings has a public component to it. So every one of those, there will be opportunity for the public to say something. There will be an opportunity for the public to listen to the experts. So yes, this is one of the best mechanisms to participate. And I would say our energy committees are the best committees in the legislature, including our interim committees, just because there's a lot of agreement on various things that need to be done. So yes.
Great. Thanks, Ann. All right, and just as a reminder, next Tuesday at noon, we have a webinar about Northwestern Energy's rate case. We'll have some experts that are going to be participating in the rate case itself, as well as a couple of folks from RMI, or the Rocky Mountain Institute, who are going to be talking about a study that they did on how we can reliably and affordably phase out the coal strip plant and coal-fired energy and replace it with renewables. So it's going to be a really great call. We hope to see you there. We are going to record it and put it up on our website and our YouTube in case you can't make it. I'm going to put the link in the chat that includes more details as well as the call information, so you can pop that on your calendars. And then, as always, get in touch if you have questions. We have time for questions now, of course. But we are also doing our legislative fundraiser right now. So if you would like, you can donate to our fundraiser. We appreciate all your support being here, of course. And as always, your participation, your messages, your support to us being here. So lots of ways to continue supporting our work, and we really appreciate it. And with that, we will go to questions. So please feel free to pop your questions in the chat. Come off mute, raise your hand, however you would like to ask questions. And if no one has questions, then we get to end early. Oh, Bob. Hey, Bob, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. It's more in the way of an observation and in part a suggestion for a tactic. But I'm thinking back to the genesis of EIC, the Environmental Information Center. Its origins came about because it was a collective of citizens that got terrified about the amount of land subdivision that was occurring, particularly in western counties in Montana. It took those terrified understandings to the legislature, And the legislature was met with opposition from the realtors, very well organized lobby, and the developers, very well organized lobby. The only way that EIC back in the day had of persuading legislators was by gathering data. So volunteers from EIC went out to county courthouses and collected the data from incoming subdivision plats and could demonstrate that there was a shitload of land subdivisions occurring under 10 acres in size, most of them in the 5-acre range. With that data in mind, the legislature said, well, let's raise the limit to 10 acres, beneath which everything will get reviewed, above which everything will pass. Guess what? All the developers and the realtors went out there and started creating plats, land division plats that exceeded those limits. Then MEIC put the volunteers back on track, went to the county courthouses and collected all the data from new incoming subdivision plats. And with that data, were able to demonstrate to the legislators that this was being abused, that all you did was raise the bar, and now the developers and now the realtors were all cashing in on 10.01 acre subdivision. Well, this story is repeatable because fast forward for a dozen years, and eventually we got to the point where 160 acres became the threshold below which land subdivisions should be reviewed by local governments. Now we've seen great abuse of that. The reason that that was created because developers and realtors started creating 20.01 acre subdivision plats. I'm just observing this history because relative to this House Bill 714, the family transfer exemption within the Subdivision and Platting Act. The reason that that exemption exists there is that when we started developing subdivision statutes in the state and regulations, everybody was sympathetic to the little old farmer and rancher who needed to divide off a piece of land to satisfy 3 children and so on. Who could object to that? Nobody did. And that's why that family transfer provision exists in the subdivision statutes. Well, guess what? Pretty soon the developers and the realtors started to recognize if they could convince the rancher to do a family transfer and then quickly buy the family transferred tracts, they would effectively be able to create a subdivision for development purposes. Now, this bill, House Bill 714, creates a situation in which local governments have to prove the intentions of the family are adverse to the intent of the Subdivision Act. It ain't the case. My question is, I'm sorry for the rant here, but my question has to do with the fact that in the past, it was data collection that enabled EIC, now MEIC, to persuade legislators that yes, these statutes and regulations that set ever increasing bars for review of subdivisions got abused and disabused 50 times over by the developers and the realtors. Now the question is, can't MEIC go back with volunteers, look through the records and see how many family transfers, just tally them up, how many family transfers turned into effective development projects? I mean, they're exempted because everybody is sympathetic to the families. Well, guess what? Within a year of the transfer, the developers and the realtors swoop in, and the next thing you know, you got a de facto subdivision. I think that is a provable case. I'm not altogether sure that it would be effective in, deterring House Bill 714 in this case. I'm just saying it's good to stick under the nose of these legislators the fact that the sacred cows of family transfers are not, in fact, being used that way. And you could get the data from county courthouses to
Yeah,
demonstrate
so
that.
Bob, it's funny that you raised that because that's one thing that we were doing until the legislature started working. Laura, who's not here today, submitted an information request to pretty much every county in the state asking for information on family transfers and subdivisions for the past 5 years, and was working with a couple volunteers to do that. And so those questions are out there. And some counties have totally ignored us. Others have responded. We're slowly collecting that information. But what I can tell you is the Bitterroot, for example, most of the subdivisions are family transfers. I mean, it was something like 160 or 200 family transfers and less subdivisions. So they're just, it's just a business model for some people, and it is ripe for abuse. And the other thing that we're doing, which we're trying to figure out whether it's going to happen this session or not, but we shouldn't have to file an information request to every county in the state. There should be a central database, frankly. So, and it's not just because of our concerns, but there's tax implications for it. I don't know if you caught the story recently about the Department of Revenue missing out on like $1 billion because they're not taxing new developments adequately. And so they need to, there needs to be more of a central database associated with development across Montana. And so that's something we're working on so that we can have those types of numbers at our fingertips. So Bob, you just landed on something that we're very much in agreement on. We're the only thing stopping us from following up on it is the darn legislature right now.
Nerf, if you had presented that information, I wouldn't have gone into that big
No,
rant
no,
and
no,
that historical perspective.
All it does is verify that we're going down the right road, and I really appreciate the historical perspective and love those EIC stories, Bob.
Yeah, it is. It is. My main point is that data can often disprove the arguments that these people are making for, well, we've got to make the counties, the local governments prove that this family is doing this family transfer.
Yeah.
Because it's legit.
Yeah.
Well, you can never do that. You just have to be able to take the data before the legislation. Hey, well, why is it that 98% of the family transfers in the past, from when it was first exempted to the present, have resulted in subdivisions?
Yeah. I mean, it's unique to Montana as far as I can tell. Most states don't do this. And the states that do have like a 10-year, like you can't sell it for 10 years. Montana's is 2.
Well, that'd be the way to do it. Stick an amendment on that bill and say, okay, we're not going to be able to disprove family intentions that it's a legitimate transfer, but let's put a 10-year timeline on it so that they can demonstrate that it's a legitimate use.
Yeah.
Maybe that's solvable by amendment.
The problem is with that is local governments don't want to be the ones to go out and say, oh, wait, you sold your property? You can't do that. So anyway, it's complicated to go after this. We should just eliminate it because subdivision review isn't that hard. But
well, thank you as always, MEIC staff, for staying on top of this stuff and moving a step ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
Howard's had his hand up for a minute. So Howard, go for it. Ask away.
On the House Bill 664, numeric standards, it went to the Senate Natural Resources hearing, I think, on Monday.
That's right.
And they haven't made the decision.
That's right. So there was 4 water bills up on Monday and Senate Natural Resources, and all of those they haven't made a decision on. They have been transmitted already, and because they're not revenue bills, there's no immediate action required. Those could pass third reading the last day of the legislative session at this point. That's not what's going to happen. They'll probably deal with it in the next week or 2. But because there's so many bills that do have a transmittal deadline right now, those are taking all the oxygen out of the room at the legislature. So they're just sitting there.
So an effective comment would go in by, say, Wednesday?
I would say do it now, just because it's they're just sitting there. I wouldn't sit around and wait, but you might be good. Monday would probably be better. That Senate Natural Resources meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so Monday will be post revenue bill transmittal, and they may take them up at that point. So probably Monday.
Once it goes through this committee, it's too late, right? Too late nothing's effective at that point.
Well, I'd like to say that we could stop it on the Senate floor, but I'm skeptical. We'll see. I think that the committee is going to be a really important bottleneck for those bills. And so probably more so than the Senate floor. But both states.
I talked to a information officer at DEQ, and it's kind of it's a little confusing that one of the comments I got was that it appears that, and I didn't ask the question, it was just thrown out there, that it looked like going to narrative standards was going to cost a little more money for the department to produce results than numeric standards, which I would have thought would have been the other way around.
Narrative standards are very expensive to enforce and monitor for, but cheaper for polluters to comply with. The problem is that DEQ doesn't have a narrative standard on the books, and they don't have any plan to put one on the books. And so it's sort of interesting that they're saying we're going to repeal numeric standards and we don't have anything in place. Because, well, for starters, that doesn't give the public or industry, anybody, an idea of what the regulation is going to be. We just don't know. And the problem with that is that the EPA has the final say here. And they've rejected this move before when there's actually been a plan in place to have narrative standards come through. EPA said, no, this doesn't qualify for a plan to assure that you're still going to be able to protect water in Montana. They don't have a plan in place. So I'm skeptical that EPA is going to approve it this round. I think what this is, though, is it's an attempt to have a different administration make the decision, frankly, now that there's a new person in charge of Region 8 at EPA. And so time will tell if this bill passes, what's going to happen exactly. But that decision, whatever it is, will be subject to legal review. And DEQ doesn't have a narrative standard. There's no narrative standard in Montana. Nothing that's been approved. So I can't imagine it being legally defensible if they approve our rollback.
Nor does EPA.
Montana has primacy over our water quality regulations. So we need to have the standard in place. If we don't, EPA may take the program away. That's one of the steps they can do. It's rare, but if we don't have a demonstrable water quality standard, they can say, okay, Montana, you're not satisfying your obligations under the Clean Water Act in order to maintain this program, and we're going to start administering it over here in Denver for you.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
I was thinking when Bob was talking that facts and numbers aren't always the most persuasive at the legislature. And it kind of feels the same when you start talking about numeric and narrative standards and how they're thinking of rolling back the numbers-based system we currently have. But we still are gonna try to stop that. Okay, any other questions, comments, interesting experiences you've had with legislators, intel on the best way to make comments this late in the session? Steve says he called the legislative switchboard on 285 at 3:30. Thank you, Steve. And wants to know if emails are more effective at that point, if they're gonna vote on it around 6.
Was the switchboard open, Steve? Then phone calls.
Calls more effective than emails or
I-
both.
Both, sure, why not?
Yeah.
If you're willing, both. I think phone calls are probably the most effective at this point in time, but absolutely emails as well. They're gonna be voting on it in the next, probably in about an hour.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Legislative Services keeps a tally of how many calls and emails they get through their messaging system. And it's just a list of all the bills in the session with how many yeses and nos they've gotten on different bills. And so when votes are coming up very quickly, it's extremely likely legislators will request that report and just look at, which way are the commenters tipping towards yes or no on particular bills. So both is good. We have heard from some people that their legislators have expressed they prefer getting text messages in a very specific format. And so if you ever get feedback from your legislator about something like that and you want to share it with us here, it's good intel. We have a couple more minutes, but if that's all, we're happy to say goodnight. Saw Rob come off mute.
I'm just going to say thanks.
Well, thanks, Rob. I think we'll call it there. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.